If you're a vegan and you're eating a vegan diet, you need to have a perfect vegan diet to be healthy. You need to know what you're doing in terms of supplementation and how to meet the nutrient needs that aren't being met through diet.
Hey, this is Ryan of Happy Healthy Vegan. So you guys have probably heard that Joe Rogan will be hosting a debate on his podcast between low-carb, paleo, anti-vegan Chris Kresser. He'll be debating against vegan medical doctor Joel Kahn. And actually, Dr. Kahn and I have been in contact over the past few weeks, and we're hoping to, when he's out here for Joe's podcast, before that, or maybe after, make a few videos together. So stay tuned for that collaboration. I sure hope that goes down. Anyway, in the meantime, I'm making this video now about Chris Kresser. I want to show, as I said, his very anti-vegan point of view and show you how factually challenged it really is, so you'll know what to expect. And Dr. Kahn will know what to expect. Not that he needs any help from me. He's going to do just fine on his own. So let's jump in with Chris Kresser now.
There's some strange arguments out there, like we shouldn't drink milk because we're the only animal in nature that drinks the milk of another animal. Yeah, well, we're the only animal in nature that uses iPhones too.
As unimportant as that may be, Chris is wrong about the iPhone thing. There's other animals in nature who use iPhones and iPads. So what Chris is doing there is like the opposite of the naturalistic fallacy, which goes something like if something is found in nature or is natural, it's somehow right or moral or we ought to be doing it. What Chris is saying is if humans are the only species on the planet that can do something, it's somehow right or moral or we ought to be doing this. And this is just complete nonsense. All he's really showing at best here is that humans are adaptable since we're the only other species that drinks the milk of another species, which is really weird when you think about it. And that's the point vegans are trying to make. No other species needs to do that. Why do we need to do that? And the thing is, we don't need to. All Chris is really showing, if anything, is that at some point in the past, a human tried this milk of another species. That human didn't die. Others tried doing it and it became a billion-dollar industry like it is now. But it doesn't mean it's right, that it's moral, or that it's even healthy. Just a silly argument.
If you study traditional peoples, as far as I know, still there's never been a traditional group that has ever been identified that voluntarily followed a vegan or even vegetarian diet that I know of. So that should tell you something right there.
That's just flat out wrong. There are indeed groups who voluntarily follow a vegan or vegetarian diet. For example, the Seventh-day Adventists. There are thousands of vegans and vegetarians amongst their followers. And these people have been studied thoroughly, comparing the health of the vegans and vegetarians to the meat eaters, and the vegans and vegetarians do quite well.
The Adventist vegetarians in California, with perhaps the highest life expectancy of any formally described population. The best of the best were Adventist vegetarians who had healthy lifestyles too, like exercising non-smokers, 87 and nearly 90 on average. That's like 10 to 14 years longer than the general population.
And there's also the diet of the traditional Okinawans, who are some of the longest-lived people on the planet. Although they're not fully vegan or vegetarian, if you take a look, just 1% of their calories come from pork or meat, 1% of their calories from eggs, 1% from dairy, 1% fish. So that leaves 96% of their calories coming from plants. And again, these are some of the longest-lived people on the planet.
And ironically, the fact that you and I are even having this conversation, this wouldn't even be happening if humans had not learned eaten meat.
Right.
There are a lot of anthropologists who now believe that eating meat was essentially what made us human. The development of fire, which allowed us to cook meat, and cooking makes the nutrients in meat more bioavailable, allowed us to spend less time foraging for food.
Well, it's a really nice fairy tale that Chris presents there about cavemen cooking meat to become smarter humans. But the reality is that the most recent research is finding that cooking carbohydrates, not meat, is what gave humans the rapid increase in brain size and intelligence. And the researchers of the study here point out that because our brain uses so much of our body's energy, about 1/4 of it, and 60% of our body's blood glucose, that it's highly unlikely that eating a low-carb diet, cooking a bunch of meat, would satisfy this high glucose need. You would need a high carbohydrate source, a high plant source to get these carbs.
If you're a vegan and you're eating a vegan diet, you need to have a perfect vegan diet to be healthy.
Oh, really? A perfect vegan diet? Tell me more.
And you need to know what you're doing in terms of supplementation and how to meet the nutrient needs that aren't being met through diet. At least in my experience, there are very few that actually do it right.
Wow, this is starting to sound very complicated. Only a few people can do a vegan diet correctly.
When it's done right, I think it's possible for some people to be healthy and thrive. And that's obvious because there are people like Rich Roll, who's like out there, he's a vegan triathlete who's out there, doing centuries and killing it. He is just an amazing athlete, and he's vegan.
Well, at least he admits a very small percentage of humans can actually successfully pull off a vegan diet. You have to do all these things correctly. So Rich Roll is one of the lucky few. I don't know how I fall into this continuum with my blood results all being within range and my athleticism. Anyway, let's see what Chris says people need to do to be so lucky like Rich Roll.
So certainly it works for some people, but there are a lot of factors that determine whether it's going to work. So one is how well you do it. Two is, whether you know what you're doing with supplementation in terms of getting the necessary nutrients.
Of course, Chris is going to say that about supplements because he sells dozens upon dozens of supplements on his own website, but I thought your followers are following your high meat diet, which has all these nutrients that we're missing. Anyway, let's take a look at Rich Roll here and see all the supplements he is not doing. He says, protein powders or supplements are not a big part of my routine. I'm not worried about not meeting my nutritional needs. I take a B12 supplement, which is the only supplement I take. So basically, Chris shot his own theory down by bringing up Rich Roll here because Chris said very few vegans can really succeed on a vegan diet, and those few that do are really meticulous about taking all these supplements to get what they're not getting because they don't eat meat. Well, Rich Roll just takes B12. So there goes your theory there, Chris, and same for me. I just take a B12 sup as well. I'm not worried. Rich Roll's not worried about all these missing nutrients, but Chris thinks the list goes on as far as these missing nutrients for vegans.
One is EPA and DHA. These are these long-chain omega-3 fats that we've heard so much about that are crucial for brain function, cardiovascular function, etc. There are no sources of those in a plant-based diet.
So since I haven't eaten fish in over 8 years, I must be totally screwed, right?
But there is something called alpha-linolenic acid, which is in walnuts and flaxseed. That's an omega-3 plant fat. Only about 5 to 10% of that gets converted into EPA and even less to DHA, like 2 to 5%. So you have to be chugging tablespoons of flax oil in order to get as much EPA or DHA that you would get from eating just a little bit of fish.
That's perhaps my favorite thing Chris said there. I have this visual of vegans chugging tablespoons of flax oil all day so they can get the DHA that they'd get if we were eating fish. Anyway, this is just complete nonsense. If this were right, if this theory of Chris's were right, we'd see all these deficient vegans. We'd have all sorts of health problems. Well, we can fact check this. In fact, Mike the Vegan did an excellent video covering are vegans deficient in DHA.
Do vegans even have DHA deficiencies? There have been multiple studies showing that vegans have lower DHA levels than fish eaters, but as this one said, there is no evidence of adverse effects on health or cognitive function with lower DHA intake. And as this 2014 study mentions, vegan DHA levels are the same as non-fish eating omnivores. So these are not uniquely vegan levels, and sometimes it's even the opposite. From this study, when looking at some fish eaters, some non-fish eating omnivores, some vegetarians, and vegans, they found, get this, vegan women had higher blood DHA levels than any other group, than the fish eaters, than anyone.
So Chris, I'd love to see your response to this. Mike showed several studies there showing that vegans are not deficient in DHA. Let's see yours. Otherwise, you're just making stuff up, which is really common amongst anti-vegans. Anyway, let's see what other nutrients we have trouble getting.
Okay.
There are other shortcomings, other nutrients like B12, which
That's an issue.
That's a big issue. And studies have shown that 68% of vegetarians are deficient in B12, 83% of vegans are, versus just 5% of omnivores.
Wow.
Yeah, I've heard many anti-vegans like Chris sound these warning bells. If you go vegan, you're going to be low in B12. But they're not being fully truthful here because it's a known fact from many studies that nearly 2/5 of Americans have either low normal B12 ranges or worse. Yeah, 40% of Americans are low in B12. However, 40% of Americans are not vegan, which should tell you something that B12 absorption is not a vegan issue. It's a people issue. So that's why it's a good idea, whether you're a vegan or not, to take a B12 supplement. And that's why I started taking one several years ago. My B12 levels were fine, perfectly healthy, but I figured, why not? What do I have to lose? It's cheap, it's non-toxic, and my B12 levels are stronger than ever. So if that's the only thing I have to supplement with as a vegan, and like what Chris Kresser's saying, DHA and everything else, if that's the worst thing about being vegan is taking a B12 supplement, that's not too bad of a diet. So leave your questions and comments down below. What do you think Chris is going to pull out on the actual debate on, against Dr. Kahn? Did I leave out any other Chris Kresser anti-vegan arguments here? I just took his arguments from this one episode of Joe Rogan's podcast from a couple years ago. So let me know if there's anything glaringly obvious I overlooked. So share that down below, and I'll be sure to pass it on to Dr. Kahn. And make sure you're subscribed to our channel, hit the notification bell to be notified when we have new videos, new live streams, and content on our community tab. So until next time, Chris, I hope you listen to Dr. Kahn and start to keep it carb, baby, keep it carb.
Changing your mind again. You've got me spinning circles, spinning round and round, spinning till I'm dizzy, falling to the ground. You've got me spinning circles round